August.
Hello. Well, now we come to this specific moment of centennial. We have now recorded 1,900 lectures, and I'd say we covered at least 175 books. I don't know even the number of articles, and covered areas stretching from, well, I think the whole thing started with physics. So quantum physics, of course, is in the foundational, I'd say, no? And then we went into philosophy, went into Heidegger by means of, was it Arkady Plotnovsky? Maybe. And Martin Heidegger gave name to the series. And he was at least participatory and in the first 1400 episodes frequently. We broadened and expanded the whole thing into neurology, science of cognition, mathematics, topology, statistics, linguistics, and really went into the frontiers of neurology, where we found affordance theory by J.J. Gibson, even more expanded by Tony Chimero, which was one eye-opener that led to a whole avenue of new thinkers and philosophers. And then we had, of course, not to be forgotten, Jacques Derrida. I'd say when it comes to importance, three main philosophers has always been in the background or at the bottom. That's Jacques Derrida, Martin Heidegger, and Ludwig Wittgenstein. Ludwig Wittgenstein was the latest contribution, and he came in via Paul Feyerabend, the Austrian philosopher of science, who was much inspired by Wittgenstein, and in his book Conquest of Abundance, Wittgenstein has a rather long chapter dedicated to him. Biology as well, quantum biology, Francisco Varela and Umberto Maturana, the two Chilean neurologists, philosophers, biologists, with their autopoiesis theory, stretched the subject into connectivism, and via connectivism we also looked into different ways of James Clear, by slowly expanding what we do. We came to start to think more in the terms of acting is reality rather than empty concepts. So the foundation for understanding Wittgenstein was already laid, so to speak, by affordances. The press on action to be taken. And then came Alexander technique, which is a philosophy in itself. I'd say Wittgenstein in the body, that's Alexander technique. The Alexander technique is action, meaning as action, and iterative action. A term that we took or thieved from Jacques Derrida. For every iteration, everything becomes strengthened. And this was in this context we also have the ideas of chaos theory. The first time we dwelled into chaos theory was as a helping tool given to us by Arkady Plotnitsky. He said it was the intermediary zone, the more understandable first step to come to quantum mechanics. And then we had Gleich in his book about chaos, and we also looked at the video where the American actor, not John Malkovich, what is his face? I've forgotten his name, but it is Jurassic Park, where there is a chaos theorist participating. I forgot his name now, but it was quite interesting, and the fractal idea of the liminal zone is very close to the frontier line between aletheia and theia in Martin Heidegger. Susie Froebel was very helpful here. She took the concept fractal into fractal time as well. She shows that time itself is multidimensional and time has dimensions in between. So time is not only one unidirectional, it goes in all directions at the same time. And this spreading of time, the fractal time, is very close to the time of modern physics, the quantum mechanical time. It is also something that draws us into the area of Merleau-Ponty, the later phenomenology, also inspired by Martin Heidegger. And there, in that process, we also, after a couple of hundred episodes, we made contact with the American philosopher Stephen M. Rosen, and then entered Kleinbottle. Kleinbottle helps to show how, for us to have an inside, it's dependent on an outside. And outside to exist, there is needed an inside. And how the both are interpenetrative. Very important, and one of the leading factors to understand why the idea of sheer innerness, or the other side of it, sheer outerness, are not wrong, but nonsensical, which is quite a different thing from being wrong. It simply cannot be understood. In this process, of course, we had great help of Jan Eyskens, the Belgian neurologist slash psychiatrist slash philosopher, who brought in the Kleinbottle, I think for the first time, via the Argentinian slash Israeli philosopher Diego Lucio Rapoport. And it became more and more interesting. So fractality then ventured into Benoit Mandelbrot's strange attractors, and we came to understand opposition and contradiction is what makes permanence possible. The only factor that creates impermanence or is impermanence is one-sidedness. To just have existence, or to just have truth, or just to have life makes life absolutely impossible. This is one of the reasons very few people today have any trust in free will, a soul, or immortality, because clinging on to life makes life impossible, especially the permanence of life. That's the only factor that can diminish the permanence of life. And then, of course, not to be forgotten, the Scottish psychiatrist and philosopher Ian McGilchrist, very helpful with Julian Jaynes in his lead. We came to understand the more expansive and widened mind, the mind of the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere that always takes in oppositions. It's the right hemisphere, for instance, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it cannot be understood today. Cutting, the mentor of Ian McGilchrist, I think he's still alive actually, said we cannot read the Odyssey. That is just the left hemisphere take, which we know is absolutely wrong. It was written for the right hemisphere, and any trying to understand it from the left hemisphere will lead us knowing less about it. So you see now the importance of handling the private language problem and such things. It's the opening up to the right hemisphere and true reading of everything that went on before. And of course, the Bible was written for the right hemisphere. The idea of these interlocutors to read it from the left hemisphere diminish the message, make it monosemic, make it incredibly different. So within McGilchrist, also we had Lisa Feldman Bartlett that shows that emotions are Barrett or Barrett? Bartlett. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, Lisa Feldman Bartlett or Barrett. She showed that emotions are little micro actions. Barrett, thank you. Micro actions or micro plans, and emotions are actually something that we construe ourselves. And that goes to show once more that emotions is not something that we feel from the inside. They are not like enclosed in the black box of our inner life. They are interactive in the global take. And the understanding of the global take, I think, firstly came from Arkady Plotnitsky, but that was incredibly strengthened by Roberto Unger and Lee Smolin, who show that the construction of the permanence of the classical law was caused the Big Bang to come into existence, and they are mutually codependent. And once one thing is established, the other one comes into existence. And that has kept modern physics into a strange stranglehold, unable to develop anymore. And also there we have the problem of the beetle box or the private language. It's the cosmological fallacy number one, baptized by Roberto Unger, if I don't remember it wrongly, or both of them together. The cosmological fallacy is the idea that you can understand the universe from the outside. So you can somehow be outside the universe and judge it, discriminate it, and tell what sort of features it has. I think there's a very nice parallel there. I would say almost synchronicity humor is also a participating thing, something a frequent visitor to these lectures is Edward de Bono, and he emphasizes humor as the very essence of thinking. Every slash of invention, every thinking which is new, which is not a construction from the old, is humor, is asymmetrical. Or as he baptized it in the end, it's lateral thinking. I will now continue with the text where I left it off at 1898. And we, of course, continue the text by James Kelhoffer. And we are presently at page 180. The author of Authentication by Withstanding the Coming Great Tribulation in the Revelation of John. I will mute my face. I will take away the video here to save bandwidth. Last time we took a good look, that was 1898. And we took the interesting factors of oppositions here and the idea that of a border in between the Christians and their surrounding pagan and polytheistic Roman / other pagan societies influential. It is in the border zone where you can have true Christianity. It's not when you try to put something away, which is the naive picture. This is the ostensive idea of Augustine. So purify it by evicting it, having a sole private language religion, where we see Christianity still working as Christianity at its very origin. For instance, in Kerala, there is a great border surface with the surrounding religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Islam, and many more actually. And in that border zone, you can have purity. It's the border zone of Terry Marks Tarlow show in the liminal area. This is what you get, the one factor, the one singularity. You need plurality to come into the possibility of a singularity. And let's see where I left off here. John commands. Indeed, and I continued my read. That's the second paragraph on page 180. Indeed, at 13:7 to 10, John highlights the inevitability of suffering, even stating that the saints will be conquered. He does not comment on the vindication until 15:2 to 4 and 17:14. At Revelation 24 to 6, the interpreter must grapple with the problem of the fate of the saints who were not martyred, and whether a second death would likewise not hurt them.
Arms of earth.
The most straightforward exegetical solution is that martyrdom would be necessary for anyone
Right.
who wishes to acquire the authority to judge the nations and to share in the first resurrection after the arrival of the New Jerusalem, with judgment having been executed against wicked humanity. Divine consolation comes at last to those who have suffered and therefore will no longer experience mourning, tears, or pain. Only those who have already resisted compromise by suffering through the great tribulation can expect to receive such consolation in the heavenly city. Heavenly, indeed. 2. Possible responses to John's valuation of anticipated suffering.
Anticipated suffering.
As stated in chapter 1, this study considers not only the conflicts that an early Christian author addresses and how persecution furthers an author's goals of exhorting and influencing others in the context of these conflicted acts, conflicts, but also the ways that others could or did dispute such claims or clams. The clams. In the case of Revelation, we must first revisit John's criticism of his opponents and ponder in a pond, however cautiously, the reaction these opponents may have had to John's message. The message. Oh no! What can happen? Any number of responses to revelation could be marshaled by sincere followers of Jesus who were loyal to Christian leaders with a theology different from that of the prophet John.
Sincere.
The profiteering John or the prophet of John, I don't know. What could it be? Responses that engage John's message directly could plausibly have included John's associating soft observance of the imperial cult with idolatry. John's prediction of a massive persecution. And John's defining of the believer's standing as a future contingency rather than a present certainty.
Certainty.
For the first of these, we return to John's definition of the problem. Namely, that even soft or casual participation in the imperial cult is adulterous. Oh dear, oh dear. These are the very enemies who killed Antipas. Enemies who will imprison and kill large numbers of God's people and who will soon be judged and face eternal torment for their wicked deeds. Deeds. Dudes or deeds, we don't know. To John's assessment of the situation, one could respond with a position that the Apostle Paul acknowledges and refutes. Namely, that no idol in the world really exists, and that there is no God but one. Asserting on this basis that there is really no danger from other gods or demons. Demons. Some participation in the imperial cult could merely indicate loyalty to Rome, but not necessarily to polytheistic religion. Polytheistic religion. Therefore, John's definition of the problem and corresponding accusation of idolatry could be discarded. I second that with this second. Second, with regard to Antipas, it is difficult to imagine Christians who would completely disagree with John in attributing some value to Antipas's death. Perhaps some would have looked favorably upon attributing to Antipas the lofty stature that came from likening him to Jesus as witness and faithful one.
Faithful one.
What is unclear is how many other Christians would have agreed with John that Antipas's death, however tragic, should be taken to foreshadowed an imminent massive persecution. Inasmuch as John expects the return of Jesus and the swift destruction of Rome to occur soon. That is, within his lifetime. The historian today has the luxury of seeing that, at least in this respect, John's detractors would have been correct in lacking a fear of persecution, or in thinking there would be a delay of the Parousia. The Parousia in Peru. I think people didn't even know about Peru in that day. So how could they have Parousia? We don't know. A third issue concerns John's possible replacement of the notion of present correlation of standing with a contingent promise of salvation. Christians who had embraced a Johannine theology of present justification would have to consider whether the value derived from having faithfully endured persecution was worth the cost of the damage done to the present assurance of salvation. At least some Christians in Asia Minor probably would have regarded as objectionable, if not scandalous, this prophet's denial of present justification. Unlike Revelation, however, none of the other and New Testament literature responds to the problems that the imperial cult posed. New problems and new solutions oftentimes go hand in hand, and with new solutions come anticipated challenges of how to relate newer formulations with traditional ones. Ones and twos and threes and fours. Although we cannot know how these theological tensions would have been resolved, it is clear that those who accepted Revelation's definitions of suffering and its soteriological value would need to rethink their understanding of believers' presently correlated standing if they had previously embraced a definition from the Johannine tradition. That was a sentence and a half. It did. In his expounding of these three themes, the impending dangers of idolatry, massive persecution, and future assurance to be validated by suffering. Assurance company.
Validated by suffering.
John would likely have drawn strong opposition from at least some other Christian circles. In order to assemble in Revelation
the strongest possible arguments for these very controversial theological issues. A higher appraisal of anticipated suffering was crucial. The revelation of John then becomes a prime example of claiming persecution for the service of exhorting believers and corroborating their standing. The preceding chapter on Hebrews examined an author who, like John, warns against the danger of apostasy. To post and apost. Perhaps a correlation can be noted between devaluing a believer's present standing on the one hand and the need to face a present or anticipated adversity with courage. On the other hand, the following on the chapter of Gospel of Mark further explores this question. As for the Christians who were sympathetic to John's message in Revelation, I find no reason to doubt that the prophet John would convince at least some in his flock about the promise of confirmed standing as a believer because of suffering through the coming great tribulation before the imminent fall of Rome and the appearance of the New Jerusalem. Indeed, the coming. Over time, however, such expectations would have inevitably spawned confusion and disappointment about the delay of the anticipated Parousia from Peru, not unlike the disappointment addressed by the pseudonymous author of 2 Thessalonians. The Thessalonians, or Salonikios. Well, that ends the reading of the offer of authentication by withstanding the common great tribulation in the revelation of John.
40 pages.
Indeed, one of the longest things ever. James Kelhoffer is very close to an accountant. He's accountant of the Revelation. It is an incredible twist on everything, but still, that chirality, we didn't mention that before, that chirality is in itself very interesting. Chirality is the, how can you say this? Well, there is a hint of it. Where did I see that? Go for a quote here. The second paragraph on page 180. And towards the end. And the second, it's a very long sentence, I will have to cut it off. I have no idea why the need for such long sentences. But divine consolation comes at last to those who had suffered and therefore will no longer experience mourning, tears, or pain. If you go to the monasemic take, which is the ideology of Kelhoffer, you will have only pain. And it will be an unending pain. This is something Milgram looked carefully into, and we also got confirmed by Benjamin Libet. The pain will be unending, It's a painful situation to be in the left hemisphere. The monosemic take is that every moment is suffering from impermanence. There is no connectivity. It is like living out HDHD, which is attention syndrome, lack of attention, I think, something like that. To go further, John's prediction, this is the second subchapter here, possible responses to John's valuation. And here we have responses, it's the last paragraph, fourth line, third. Responses that engage John's message directly could plausibly have included John's associating soft observance of the imperial cult with idolatry. John's prediction of a massive persecution and John's defining of the believer's standing as a future contingency rather than a present certainty. Here, Kelhoffer thinks there is a difference between future and present. In quantum mechanics, future is the absolute foundation of the present. It's teleological in its foundation, and they are not cut off from each other. To have a future contingency will make present contingency, but a future certainty will also make for a present certainty. There's nothing contingent about the future as we know time. It's the Newtonian time that gives that direction. I like rather the softness of John, the soft observance and the dividing line, the liminal zone between the pure Christianity and the surrounding, what can you say, store of idolatry, polytheism, and pagan worship. In there, it's the only liminal zone when you can have purity in the plurality. With only one zone and one monosemic take, you have nothing of purity. In fractality, you have something called buzz, incredibly impure. It is lacking permanence, it is lacking properties, it is confused. Without opposition, the galaxy wouldn't exist. But thinking cannot exist with oppositions. This is a bit a take of once more the black box or the beetle box in some kind. In the next page, 181. Some participation in the imperial cult could merely indicate loyalty to Rome, but not necessarily to polytheistic religion. I think that sounds a bit acronymous. Polytheistic religion wouldn't be used at that time. I think that's a later take on the whole thing. It seems maybe a bit out of place.
But I think Kelhoffer is, correct here. I have to admit. I think
it did exist.
You need a label. You need a label.
But is it a modern label or did it exist at the time? It's invented. Well, anyway, yeah, of course you invent your labels. You can do that.
Sometimes you need labels.
Yeah, or invented, or well, okay, it's okay to invent. Well, it's very Derridian in a way. Then we go to the delay of the Perusia. I like that one. The historian today, it's the second paragraph. The historian today has the luxury of seeing that at least in this one respect, John's detractors would have been correct in lacking a fear of persecution, or thinking there will be a delay of Purusha. That is most interesting. And I like to contrast Purusha with Peru, who wasn't really discovered at the time. But Peru is also a transcendental zone. It didn't exist, but it will exist in the future, will be discovered in the future. So in a way, it is existent. It's not a contingency. It is existing today already. Bringing some ambiguity where it should be. It's lacking in ambiguity, the whole story. It's lacking in what can make for truth. Bring that in, bring it on. And to seal the whole thing off, the second paragraph on page 182. The preceding chapter on Hebrews examine an author who, like John, warns against the danger of apostasy. Is it a warning or is it an invitation? I would say it's both. We need the apostasy to sort of have a bordering zone. Without apostasy, without pagan worship, without the Roman cult, how could you define yourself as Christians? There would be no liminal zone. Instead, you'd have to rely to these sharp distinctions, the idea of a sharp concept. The sharpness doesn't exist in language. The sharpness, if you like it, it comes from having a bordering zone. And in the borders, you can upheld what you think normally is impossible. So the apostasy could be a warning, could also be an invitation. We have both going on at the same time. And once more, we have a very interesting take on the ambiguity, very likened before to the duck rabbit we often use. And reading it from the right side of the brain, as it should be, there would be the other side constantly present, like a supplement, to use a Derridian term. Well, Kalle Lundahl, please enter the scene. Most welcome.
Will you put the camera closer to me, or?
Yes, of course. Let's see.
So I will go back a little bit. It's page 169.
Yes.
169. And since you mentioned boundaries, these subsections analysis of Revelation 9, 21, 22 in relation to 2 supports the conclusion that part of John's overarching message in Revelation engaged in a debate about where to mark the boundary between the Christian community and the pagan world.
Yes.
And we spoke about the sharpness of boundaries.
Yes.
And in this case, we can once again compare Wittgenstein's family metaphor. That is, boundaries are very difficult to, and problematic to establish. And they should not be sharp. No. Think about the Norwegian coastline. Where is the line? On the other hand, of course, if you have war, like think about the First World War, what is it called in English? The Skyttekosskrig.
You mean the trenches?
Trench war. Okay, there you have harsh boundaries, but in real life, it's problematic. Also for them, it was problematic because people got killed.
It's a very good example, actually, where we go from the left hemisphere, from the right hemisphere, because the very first war year, 1914, when Christmas came, they went from the trenches on one side to the other to celebrate Christmas together, to share some food. They didn't have much food and wine, and even sing hymns. And that was the last time in world history when that was done. That was the most common thing. And I think somehow they still upheld the borders. You had to cross the border to have a border. But after that, there were no clear borders, because the war, it didn't move anywhere after that, more or less. And millions of people were killed the following years. That became the most bloody war. And I think one of the reasons is they didn't have this interpenetrated border. They wanted to have a very sharp division somehow. And they didn't allow transmigration, interpenetration, the outside, the enemy couldn't come over. They didn't make any good ceasefires anymore, and it became this ludicrous modern idea of a sharpness. It didn't work in actuality. Nothing was gained in the Great War. It was everybody's loss, actually. Horrible war.
And the Germans in World War II had success because they now abandoned the rigid borders.
Yeah, they did.
They thought in the right hemisphere fashion to, of course, to our damage, our damage, but for today.
Yeah. From that point of view, yeah, I agree.
Hitler, you can, of course, say he was terrible, but he was right side of the brain. I think he was.
He definitely had those features. Yeah, he was Attila the Hun with the right hemisphere brain going on. He allowed a lot of deviations from rules or sharp borders. There are many examples of that, and that's facing reality somehow, doing things. And I think maybe his loss in the end, he became left hemispheric, too sharp, and divided the people and so forth for no good use. Yeah, an excellent example. Yeah, very good.
So speaking, is Kelhoffer monosemic or is he not? The thing is that he sometimes he allows ambiguity, sometimes he's monosemic, but he's doing it arbitrarily without any rules. In this case, I think it's bad because he does when it suits his purpose.
Yes.
So it's arbitrarily sometimes monosemic, sometimes it's not. And let me give you an example. I think it's worth repeating because this is a concluding lecture on Kelhoffer. So one is example of we have done it, but I think for the sake of repetition, it's on this page. We had this. It was on page 146 about the dia, famous dia.
Yeah.
About it can be because of the word of God and the witness of Jesus.
Yeah.
And he says it cannot not mean for the word of God. So you see, it can also mean purpose. So the question is, I think it's for you want to have.
I showed this to some other people and I said, "Oh my God!"
but it's fun actually to think that okay. So if you because of somebody sent him to Patmos. Because of the word God, somebody sent him there, or he went there voluntarily for the purpose of. I think they are interpenetrating senses in this case.
It's a little bit like somebody accused me. Well, if somebody accused me, like if I give a gift to a beggar, the person can say to me, and this often happens, like you did it to feel good. Yeah, that's one part. It's always a part, but it's also you bring something to someone else. So this monosemic take is like either or Well, hey, it could be both,
Mm.
and it could be either.
Mm.
I love that. We know that from quantum mechanics, nothing is either or. It's always complementary. And I think one excuse for people not giving money away is like they say it's egoistic to do it. But they do say that, people, yeah. So, and you see how this sort of logic leads to problems.
And okay, I could give many examples, but this last thing is on this concluding page about the 40-minute fall of Rome and appearance of the New Jerusalem. The thing is that we don't know the dating of Book of Revelation. It could have been written before the fall of Jerusalem, year 70, 80, 70. So I think that we should be open to both possibilities. But I'm not categoric. I think you have many layers.
Oh, yeah.
So to say, and I think that this makes it exciting. It could refer back to the fall of Jerusalem too. It could be.
So
it could
this is
refer
how
back.
time works. Susie Frobe showed
Mhm.
in the present you always have the future.
Mhm.
And that linear thinking that Kelhoffer is having with a date,
Mhm.
this is going to be gone in 10 years. We're going to have quantum mechanical time.
Mhm.
So this system of linear thinking is outdated a bit.
Mhm. And now I would like we need to celebrate. But since we are at the university library, alcohol is.
Okay, I
So
don't know that.
I don't. I think it like so. We have to keep a low profile. Because so if our friend
That
is,
almost sounded like a bottle that
if you
opened up.
don't, it's not. You want to say something conclude words before I give you?
Well, what is with ambiguity and
we need to move this.
yeah, sure. A supplemental.
You could show us phones in the camera because this is
Celebratory moment.
So you can show us in the screen. You could even eliminate the. I don't need to be. So
I don't know how to stop it, to be honest. I think only you can do that.
no, actually, because you are the host always. But it doesn't. Otherwise, you keep.
I took it away now, but it's still there.
Okay, let's keep it. I think it's not the whole.
Okay, it's not the whole world.
Okay. So
We got the whole world.
So look into that, and here comes the surprise.
Let's see. Oh my God!
Babies.
Baileys.
So hopefully.
Let's get the bailiff. Baileys will do the bailiff.
There. Yeah. For
Thank
1900.
you.
1900.
Smells good.
Okay, so shares for 1900.
Hooray! And congratulations for your perseverance. Cheers, everyone. 1900 episodes. Very tasty.
Yes.
Is it made from chocolate or coffee or what is it?
So let me see. Everyone loves cream, they say. Let me see. Not as milk.
Irish cream. It was very good anyway. Sweet, like a dessert. Why, thank you very much, Kalle. Cheers.
Okay.
Hooray, 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 hooray for the 19th episode. And we will be celebrating 2000 pretty soon, maybe
In January.
in January or by the end of the year, I'd say. By its speed. Well, yeah, indeed. That is in itself a feat. And thank you everyone for listening in to support and always be there for us. Do appreciate your comments. This is a mission beyond what we thought from the beginning it would be. Now it goes even further much, much longer than I ever anticipated.
Mhm.
It's living by itself and it's creating its own rules.
And I have a wish for 2024. A visit to Patmos. Tia.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Tia with the purpose for Patmos.
I don't even know what Patmos is. They're somewhere in Greece, that's what
Yes, close to Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very tasty.
Oi, oi, oi.
We'll end there. Thank you everyone for looking into this lecture
All right.
and discussion. Have a very pleasant morning, day, or afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.